right, the time I have is 7:31. I will call today's Yardley Borough Council meeting to order. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we continue, I will just ask us to observe a moment of silence for Gene Cadwallader, who passed away this week. He served over 35 years with the Yardley Makefield Fire Company. All right, thank you very much. From there, we will move on to our roll call. Council members, just be mindful you need to unmute yourself for this part. Mary Ann.
Ms. Thompson?
Here.
Ms. Siegel-Morris?
Here.
Mr. Ross?
Here.
Mr. Bria?
Here.
Mr. McCann?
Here.
Mr. Barry?
Here.
Mr. Feiner?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, all members present. That we will move on to some community announcements. I'll begin with the three that are on the agenda, and then I have a few to add. Not surprisingly, we are starting to see more event cancellations or postponements. The Memorial Day Parade this year has been canceled, so that will not take place. The Memorial Mile has been rescheduled to, I suppose we can call it a Veterans Day Mile. That will now take place the Sunday before Veterans Day, which is November 8th this year. Additionally, the 5K has been rescheduled to October 25th. And our third cancellation is the Rotary Club Car Show has been canceled this year. A few additional announcements I just wanted to make note of. The first being that PUA is available, which is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. This was long awaited, but this is the program that would allow some small business owners and self-employed folks to receive unemployment compensation. That application finally went live over the weekend. I know a lot of folks have been waiting for that one, myself included, and asking about it. Sort of a blanket statement. Quite a while ago, most folks probably received their census forms, but just want to put a reminder out there for everyone to please fill those out. It's easily done online at 2020census.gov and give you something to do for about 15 minutes during your quarantines. And the final item I wanted to make note of, most people have probably seen that the primary election this year has been rescheduled to June 2nd. Additionally, this year, the Department of State has rolled out mail-in voting for everyone. It's not like before when you had to be away or sick. Anyone can apply for a mail-in ballot. The website to do so is votespa.com/apply-mail-ballot. And I think particularly for Yardley Borough, since we only have one polling location, it would be wise for, especially in the primary, most of our folks to try to vote this way. Certainly, I think we could all see why it might not be a good idea to have everybody in town run through a single location in a 13-hour window. So would certainly encourage everyone to please apply for their mail-in ballots. Any other council members have something to add in terms of community announcements? All right, don't see any, so we will move on to public comment. This is the portion of the meeting where members of the public may comment on items that do not appear on the agenda. If you wish to comment on an item that is on our agenda, you will be given an opportunity to do so while council is considering that item. To be recognized for public comment, we ask that you use the raise hand feature in Zoom. So if you are dialed in by telephone, you do that by pressing *9. If you have joined us on the app or through your browser, you'll have to find the participants tab at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And when that pops up, there should be a little raise hand button on the at the bottom of the participants list. So that being said, do we have any public comment this evening? All right, I don't see anyone.
I have a comment.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
yes, I can now. Ms. Perlmutter, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't see
You know what, Councilman Bria, I think it's *6 this time because it gave me different instructions. I just wanted to let you know that. When I was doing *9, I don't think you could recognize it. So *6 is what it told me to do. Okay, well, I guess my first comment is, are the committees holding their meetings online? Have they been?
So we are going to begin with the committees of council holding meetings online. Many of them have not, simply because with all of the restrictions in place, there haven't been any business items. So for example, through Public Works, with all the construction projects essentially frozen, there hasn't been a need to meet. However, I believe next we are, at the beginning of next month, Public Safety will be holding a regular meeting. We're deferring to the chairs of the committees on that. In addition, some of our resident commissions are planned to be meeting by Zoom. I know that HARB has had a few meetings. I'm not sure if anyone else has.
Can I request that since these are public meetings, that the access to them be published on the Yardley Borough website? Because typically they would be public meetings and residents would be allowed to attend.
Correct, yes. We can, as these get scheduled, we'll make sure that in the same place we've posted the council information, we can post information for committee meetings.
Okay, great. And just one other thing. Is the code enforcement officer working at this time? Is he being paid during this time?
Paula, I'll defer to you to answer.
Unmute. He is working as needed.
Oh, okay, because I'm just a little confused. I know there's a borough-wide stop work order because of the government Pennsylvania rules with the pandemic. And I know that, you know, a lot of contractors, especially some of the bigger contractors, have been following the rules and losing a considerable amount of time and money by not doing, you know, construction. For example, that house on, you know, the one on Main Street. But there's been a number of other obvious construction that continues to go on, and Manager Johnson's been very responsive to it. And what I don't understand is why is the manager and the chief of police trying to enforce that when we have a code enforcement officer who has a Yardley Borough vehicle? Why isn't he enforcing that?
The incident that you sent me today, Dawn, the chief and I went and investigated it because Wes was not available.
Oh, okay. So the other things during this time, I mean, there's been several areas of town where there's just obvious violations, and most of the places where this is going on don't have permits displayed. So that's in addition to working during the stop work order. I just wanted to know if the code enforcement officer is working, why is he not noticing these things? Why is he not, I mean, people shouldn't have to be calling in, and really you have more important things to be doing. And I'm sure the chief has more important things to be doing. So I just don't know, like, is he keeping regular hours? Because it's been really quite obvious, the different areas of town where this is going on.
Anytime we get a potential violation, we always act on it, whether it be myself, Wes, or the police department. So we're all looking at everything. So it depends on what's being done. Is it somebody at their house? Are they working on their individual home? Is it landscaping? I don't know. The only recent one that I can think of is the one you were calling about today.
Okay, well, again, it just, I just can't emphasize, we've had problems with code enforcement before, and there is obvious construction. And frankly, Paula, it's right behind your house. I mean, you cannot miss it. The entire building's being renovated every day with trucks there. So I don't understand how you cannot see it or the code enforcement officer can't notice that.
Code enforcement
It just
officer
seems
was
like-
at that property, and so was the police.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in here. I'd like to move on from this rather than get into a discussion of individual code enforcement cases. However, as Paula said, and I'll just reiterate, our code enforcement officer is still currently working. He's always been part-time, so it is not here all the time, certainly. But, you know, we are still going about the business of all of our regular duties, which include code enforcement. All right, thank you. Do we see any additional public comment tonight? And it sounded like there was a little bit of an issue with the raise hand function. So if you're having trouble with that, if you're on the screen, I guess just wave or unmute yourself and jump in. All right, I am not seeing any now. I will ask again at the end before we close out the meeting, but for now we will move on to our next agenda item. Item number 6 is consideration of the consent agenda dated today, April 21st. Are there any items of the consent agenda that a member of council would like considered separately? All right, hearing none, I'll ask for a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Wait a second. All right, motion was made by Councilperson Thompson, seconded by Councilperson Berry. Are there any discussion or questions on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. Moving on to Chief Kelly, please report.
All right, sir, thank you. Very brief report tonight. Our award ceremony, which is normally the second meeting in May, will be postponed. We envision doing that probably sometime in August, perhaps depending on the timings. That may coincide with our promotions and we can do one larger ceremony as opposed to 2 small ones. The only other item I have, and some of you received by email, was tragically this morning we responded to a 1-car motor vehicle accident in the 30 block of South Delaware Avenue where there was a fatality. So our hearts and prayers go out to that family. It was, again, 1 car, and there was factors that lead us to believe it was excessive speed with no signs of braking. So our investigation on that continues. And that's the end of my report, sir.
All right, thank you, Chief. Any questions, comments from council? Okay, moving on, we will go to our engineer.
Alrighty, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Alrighty. So first thing is the resolution that needs to be ratified to be submitted with the land acquisition grant tomorrow. It is a very super non-committal resolution. It had like no details in it about what the project is or cost. It just has the project name and that it's from Yardley, but that was their standard that they needed. I even asked whether or not we needed to change it up since we're still unsure about what the match is going to be since we haven't had the appraisal done and we're still trying to find exactly where we're going to meet the match funding, but they said that I'm just supposed to use the form that they have up there. So that was sent to Paula. I don't know if it is in everybody's packets or not.
All right, great. You know, and I suppose even if it's not, we're essentially just making a resolution to hand in the application here. So give me just a second. I'm looking through for it. So do I hear a motion from council on a resolution 20-05 for the submission of the Pico lot grant?
David, can I ask a question first?
Yes.
Did we, I didn't see the document either. Did we get an appraisal completed?
No, the appraisal has not occurred yet. That's the second thing that we need to approve tonight is to award who's going to actually do the appraisal. I requested 3 quotes, 1 declined, and then I got 2 back. So that'll be, do you want to do that first before we do the resolution?
Well, no, I didn't know we needed the appraisal to be completed before we submit tomorrow. That's
No,
all.
so many people are in a similar boat and oftentimes appraisals lag behind. So we already have an extension with submitting that aspect of the application. So when I spoke to the grant coordinator, especially of the fact that we don't necessarily know where the match funding is coming from yet, what he said is that they don't typically award this grant until November, and then the paperwork doesn't happen until January. And that we should apply saying that we have the match, and then we have a couple of months to actually really figure it out. And if it becomes apparent that we don't think we're going to get there, then we can withdraw our application. But you can't submit a late application. So he was like, get it all in, and then you have a little bit of wiggle room to really evaluate where you're at once you get the appraisal back.
Have you had any talks with Pico at all?
I have. They're actually supposed to be providing me a letter that kind of states like what their current asking price is, as well as make it aware that they're willing to sell. So based off of what I heard back from them, they haven't actively marketed it yet, but it is still for sale and available, and they were willing to write that letter. But I didn't get any kind of numbers from them yet. So it's still very much of a up in the air kind of a thing.
Okay, I'll move the resolution.
We have a motion.
Second.
Great. So a motion made by Councilperson Berry, seconded by Councilperson Thompson for resolution 20-05 in regards to a grant application for the Pico lot. Before we continue with discussion, I see that Paula did just forward that to everyone again. It's basically a boilerplate.
Yeah, there's really nothing there.
So just a formality, but are there any further questions or discussions on this resolution?
I will just say with the budget getting tighter and tighter this year, if we progress with a match this year, it will be from one of our reserve accounts or from the line of credit that we're looking into with Newtown Bank. It is not likely that we will find that money in an excess in a line item from this year.
So that leads me to a question. If we did get the grant, at what point would we have to like place a bid?
Like to purchase it.
Yeah.
So that can kind of change. So when I was looking through the paperwork and talking about it with the grant coordinator, they kind of recognize that sometimes this process happens sooner than the grants get awarded. And so there can be a waiver of retroactivity that if we were to move forward with it and then be awarded the grant, you could like kind of get reimbursed for it. They don't necessarily recommend that because it's kind of, you don't want to get stuck having to pay for the whole thing. So they said paperwork would go through around January, and then that's when the money would be available to be spent. If that
Okay.
makes sense.
Understood. And I know we too have sort of spoken a little bit in the past about, some possible other grant opportunities. And I believe when the borough purchased Fitzgerald Field, that's sort of how it was done, where we pieced together different funding sources. So that is a possibility. I'm sure everything's tight now, but.
Yeah, so at the moment, the plan is to apply for the Growing Greener grant that's due at the end of May, that this lines up with preserving open space. And then additionally, PICO has their very own grant that's due in the fall that's for preserving open space. and we might get preferential treatment since this is one of their lots. So we're definitely going to go after everything that we can.
Understood. Do we have any other from council first? Do we have any other questions or comments? I don't see any, so I will then, I see Ms. Perlmutter. You are unmuted, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm a little confused here. It sounds like PICO is, the borough is trying to acquire the lot from PICO with a grant. Is that correct?
With the help of a grant, yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, what I don't understand is why is the engineer involved in this? What, I mean, are we paying the engineer to do this? Why wouldn't the borough manager be involved in this? I don't understand why the engineer would need to be involved in the acquisition of a property.
We're involved in the grant application process, which requires substantial exhibits to be submitted. We have to do a cost estimate that we have to sign off on. And Paula is helping and is involved in the process.
Are you getting paid to do that? I mean, are you billing the borough for your time to do that?
Yes.
Because it seems like it doesn't require any particular engineering skills. It seems like just a grant application that I don't understand why we would need to pay the engineer to apply for a grant when this would be something that the borough would do. Unless there's something involved with engineering.
The cost estimate does have to be provided by an engineer, yes.
Right, so as Ms. Clay mentioned, there are certain technical aspects that need to be included in the application, that require the services of our engineer. And I just do want to note from a procedural point of view that at our previous council meeting, we did authorize as a council the expenditures to move forward. So, we got information on what our engineer was doing for us and what those costs were going to be before we proceeded with this process.
Is that published anywhere? What the engineer is actually putting together? Is that published on the Yardley website anywhere? Or, it just seems that I really would like to understand better exactly what the engineer is providing and how much they're billing for their time for it.
We were pre-approved for a do not exceed cost at the last council meeting, and once the application is completed and submitted, we can certainly provide a PDF to Paula for her to publish for people to view what was submitted.
And from what I understand, we're not going to have the matching funds to even obtain this. So we're expending money to the engineer, and we most likely won't even have the funding to match it unless we get a line of credit. Isn't that just what Caroline said?
No, that's not correct. We have extensive, well, I wouldn't say extensive, but we have a good amount of reserve funding in both our capital reserve and our emergency fund. So capital reserve would be probably the most appropriate here. Either one, we would more than cover this, but we might not want to spend it with lines of credit currently at nearly zero on interest rates. That's another good option for us that we're looking into.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have any additional comments on this resolution before I call the vote? All right, hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, hearing none, that motion carries 7-0. All right, next up.
All right, so next part of that is to get you guys to approve the appraiser to move forward with their work. So I requested quotes from Al Fakes, George Singpel, and Susan Curran. And I forwarded their responses to Bucky and Paula. And Bucky suggested that we have you all just kind of make that decision tonight, since we had already gotten approval to submit the appraisal at a later date, and I didn't get the final bid until late last Friday anyways. So George's total quote is $1150, and he promised a 7-day turnaround. And Susan's bid was for $1874, and there was not a specified turnaround, just that she would do it as soon as possible once told to move forward.
And this is part of the original do not exceed from last time?
Yeah, so the do not exceed included, we estimated that the appraisal would be between 1,000 and 1,500. So George's is within that, Susan's is slightly above.
All right, then I guess just to make it formal, we could entertain a motion to move ahead with the lowest bidder.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, motion made by Councilperson Thompson, seconded by, pick one, Councilperson Berry, to move ahead with the appraisal in the amount of $1,150. Do we have any further discussion from council? Are there any discussion questions from the public? All right, hearing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. All right, what's next?
Okay, next is the easement for the Foster. And I'm not actually sure what can happen tonight. Bucky might need to chime in on this, but this is in regards to the Main and Afton intersection. When PennDOT came out to do their site walk with the design team, they recognized that there were some locations of poles and the cabinet that were kind of making it a tight squeeze on the sidewalk. So they wanted to move some things around, but that ended up being outside of the right-of-way, which required us to get an easement from the Fosters. So between Bucky's team and RVE, we put together the paperwork and the exhibits, and all of it is ready to go and needs to be signed by the Fosters and the borough. And I'm not quite sure how that has to happen in this kind of a situation. So, you know.
Yeah, Bucky, I guess if you want to chime in here.
Sure, I can chime in. I mean, the document was just completed, I think, literally this afternoon.
Yeah.
With final legal description for the easement property and a couple of other details. So at this point, it hasn't been reviewed by the Fosters. I suppose it's possible they could have some feedback or comments to the document. I guess at this point, we would need council's approval to really just proceed and present it to the Fosters, assuming that they have no comments and are okay with the document. Then we would need the authority to go ahead and enter into the easement agreement. So if we could get a motion to that effect, essentially to approve the easement subject to the approval of the Fosters, I think that would be sufficient.
Bucky, can you summarize what the easement does very succinctly?
Liz could probably do that better than I.
Basically, they are relinquishing a portion of their existing parcel to the borough to be considered part of the right-of-way of the road. So the borough will have the rights to have the intersection pieces of equipment, the various ones, on that land, and can do whatever they want and have access to it.
Okay, thanks.
And I understood it was necessary based on the final design of the intersection, correct?
Yeah, based off of that realignment that happened after the field visit, the new area that they wanted to move it to was outside of the existing right-of-way. So basically, this paperwork and easement will move that line of the existing right-of-way to now encompass those things, but nothing more. Like, we really weren't trying to take any more than what was absolutely needed to move forward with the project.
Okay, I'll make a motion to proceed as Bucky suggested.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Councilperson Barry, seconded by Councilperson Ross, to approve the traffic signal easement, I guess, additional upon agreement for Mr. Foster. And we hear any additional discussion, questions, comments from council on this item. Okay, and Ms. Perlmutter, again, I see your hand up. I'll unmute you.
Thank you. Again, I assume that the engineer had designed all of this project. And again, I don't understand how it got this far along and now requires an easement at this point, and then requires, you know, more legal work, more, you know, hours for the job. I remember last week at the meeting, Ms. Coletti had said something about you wouldn't know until you got further into it. It just seems that this should have been factored in prior to it getting to this point. I mean, I'm just concerned about the money that keeps going out to the engineering company and these changes.
This is a grant, right?
Yes.
So does the grant cover it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
This is, just chiming in, this is a little bit of a disconnect between the PennDOT design team and the PennDOT field team. So it was approved at a certain location. When they had their pre-con meeting, PennDOT field crew came out and wanted to make some adjustments. They're minor. They only moved it a couple feet, but it was enough to put it outside the right of way. And so it's just requirements of PennDOT at this time, and how the intersection is aligned and the right of way lines and everything that kind of meet out there. So it's just the location of one of the poles is going to be technically on the Foster's property.
I understand. Does the grant cover the cost of the legal fees involved in this?
Bucky?
So, you know,
I'm not sure about that. I guess I don't know for sure.
I mean, we'll have to refer back to probably the original grant to see what's covered and what's not. So we can certainly check on that.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into that. Off the top of my head, I don't really know. So.
And we did
Thank
receive
you.
a grant like 4 years ago, and it's still ongoing.
Right. This is a long project. So I know we're all anxious to see it move forward. All right. Before we move on, just one more call for any questions, comments, concerns on this easement. All right. Hearing that, I'll call a question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, hearing them, that passes 7-0.
Okay. And then other general updates before we get into the specific project updates would probably include the EAC watershed management plan. We had a kickoff meeting last week that went very well and felt very productive, and we have a game plan to move forward with as much of the project as we can while still you know, practicing social distancing and following the rules of the governor. So working with the president of EAC and some of the other members, we are going to try to figure out where we want to set up the testing locations. And then while we set that up, we're also going to be moving forward with purchasing the equipment, which is something the borough has to do directly. So we are getting feedback from ASA about the equipment to get and making sure with EAC's members that it's what they want and will be comfortable utilizing and working with. So in the next week or two, will be working with the borough to help purchase that equipment for that project, which is covered by the grant, but the borough does have to purchase it itself. RVE cannot, and neither can ASA, otherwise it won't fit in with the grant line item so that you can get reimbursed for it. But yeah, so we're excited about that, excited to be moving forward with that. And I think we can move on to project updates.
All right, go ahead, all yours.
All right, so Main and Afton, we are still in a back and forth with PennDOT to get construction up and running again. The contractor, Armour, did receive a waiver, but there has been a lot of back and forth with regards to any PennDOT projects. Yardley's project is in a little bit of a different scenario than some of the other municipalities that have not been allowed to get these projects up and going again, because we were in the middle of construction and they also have the waiver, but we still haven't gotten the official go-ahead. But I talked with Fred today because the last thing that we heard was on Friday, where they told us that as of now, they are not giving an extension regardless of what's happening. We still have to have 80% invoice by the end of May to receive the grant money. So Fred and I spoke today actually to kind of discuss like where he was at with everything and if he thought that that was still possible. And he said that he's already ordered all of the materials, including the poles. The last time he spoke to them, they're actually going to come in a little bit sooner than they initially thought. So that's good news. He's expecting early July at this point. But he agreed that Armour was willing to do what they needed to do to be able to get to that 80% invoice, and would understand if, you know, the borough wanted to create a situation where they could invoice it, but we wouldn't pay them until they actually do the work, but just so that we could meet the stipulations that PennDOT is giving us so that we can get this grant funding to come through.
Right. Yeah, thanks. I guess just keep us posted on that. I know it's sort of up in the air.
Yeah, so we're hopeful that we're going to get an answer by the end of this week and they can get back out there, especially with the fact that that construction was going to require a detour. And we would very much like to have to deal with that one. There's very little traffic. So hopefully that we get a good answer. And then on to Mary Yardley Bridge. So we are still in the process, going a little bit back and forth with PHMC about making sure that with the electronic submittal process, we have everything that they wanted in the way that they wanted it. And I've been a little bit bogged down with Main and Afton and the PICO grant application, but that will go out by the end of this week as well. And they have been telling us that they're turning around things much faster than normal because everybody is a little bit more focused on reviews these days, being at home and not being able to do field work. So hopefully we'll make good progress on that by the next meeting. And then the PICO property, we kind of already talked about the majority of that during the report with regards to the appraisal and the resolution. I don't know if anyone has any other questions, but you know, we've already gotten a letter of support from the Planning Commission. And again, PICO is still willing to hear us out, and hopefully we get the letter from them tomorrow to submit with the actual application. Otherwise, we'll append it to the appraisal. But other than that, I don't think I have anything else on the docket.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions for our engineer before we move on? All right.
Hey, David, it's Roger Crook. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Just a question for Elizabeth. We caught a little bit of the update about Yardley, Mary Yardley Bridge. I guess it sounds like it's going to be an attempt to do an aluminum bridge now, which will then be able to be on the existing abutments, not require as much rebuilding of those. I'd like to get an update about that part of it.
Sure. So the goal and the intent right now is to submit it for both the FRP and the aluminum option and to see what PHMC says. If they approve only the aluminum, then they approve only aluminum, we move forward with that. If they approve both of them, the intent would be to bid out both options and to see what ends up being the most cost effective for the borough.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Great. Any additional questions for the engineer?
David Piquardati, quick question.
Go ahead.
For the Pico lot and its appraisal, can we verify and ensure that that appraisal is based upon the fact that this is going to be a non-buildable lot only?
That is very much our intention. And actually, I already had a conversation with Mike Italia and Bucky about providing a letter that's supposed to be included with the appraisal that states that there's not supposed to be new development on this property.
Not only not supposed to be, but there cannot be. Right? We don't want to appraise it with even the potential of having the lot being buildable, because that's going to affect its value.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Understood. That is, we've communicated about that, and that will be made clear when this appraisal is done.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? All right. With that, then we will move on to Manager Johnson for your report.
Besides my report that I submitted to you all already, I got notified that our 2019 annual audit should be done by probably the end of the week. So I'll forward that to all of you once we receive it. And then our first quarter numbers we are working on right now, and we should have our numbers out to you probably by the end of this week, if not beginning next week. And that's all I have to report.
All right. Any questions for our borough manager?
I'll just dovetail on that. I've kind of alluded to general government keeping a close eye on the budget and thinking that it's going to be tighter than we had liked. So we were waiting for those first quarter numbers to come out to kind of present a more updated budget at the next meeting. So Paula and Patty are working on those.
All right. Any other comments, questions? All right. We will move on. Mr. Klosser, Solicitor's Report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. First, before I get to the tax resolution, just wanted to report to council that the governor signed Senate Bill 841 yesterday. That bill does a number of things, one of which is essentially to legally validate these virtual meetings that we've been having during the emergency period. So that's a positive thing. There are other issues dealing with extension of deadlines regarding land development matters and things of that nature. We are preparing a summary which we'll provide to the manager and to any members of council that would like to see it as well. So we should have that forthwith. And then the substantive item, we have prepared a resolution for council's consideration that would align with the county regarding the collection of property taxes this year by essentially deferring for 1 month the period at which you can pay without incurring a penalty. So that would align with what the county did recently and push that period to the end of July. Simultaneously, the resolution would extend to the end of July the collection dates for the borough's per capita tax and business privilege tax. So that's essentially the substance of the resolution that we prepared, and it would be resolution number 20-06.
All right, great. Do we hear a motion on that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion is made by Councilperson Thompson, seconded by Councilperson Ross to approve resolution 20-06 to delay the tax collection dates for 2020. I just I think Becky did a good job explaining there. This is to make our deadlines consistent with the new deadlines at the county. So this would affect the penalty period, but it would not affect the discount period, which I believe would be is the end of this month, is April 30. That remains the same. However, that period where the face value is due is being extended for an extra 30 days, which again is consistent with what the county has done for their portion. So are there any questions, comments, concerns on this item?
I would just like to mention for the benefit of the public that, you know, there are kind of two major groups right now. There are the people who essentially still have their job and are working from wherever, and there are people who are like in, you know, economic shock. And this is intended to help those people. But if you are a person who can make the payment, I just want to encourage people to make the payment, because the borough, you know, the cash flow of the borough is really important, and we don't want to get into a situation where we have to get lines of credit just to keep things going because of the delay in payments. So I made my payment. I just scheduled it to happen, and you know, if you can do it, please do it. If not, this is for you.
Well said. Thank you. Additional comments or questions?
Just on, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Ryan.
Just for the per capita, does this also extend to the occupation tax? Because I know we usually send them both out together. So I just wanted to make sure it also extends to the occupation tax.
No, this does not address the occupation tax.
Okay.
Was that a limitation, or can we sort of just add that in at this point?
Not sure about that. I'd have to check to see. It may be limited by the statute, but I can check on that, and if need be, we could address it at the next meeting.
Okay.
All right, yeah, let's move ahead that way, because I know that with some of these taxes, especially these are sort of ones that have been in place and we're bound by certain restrictions on them. So we can revisit that. All right, any other questions, concerns?
I just had received questions about cash flow, as Uri brought up. We do have enough cash on hand to make through to July 30th, but we do still appreciate timely payments if you're able to make them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions, comments from the public on this item? And I don't see any, so I will go ahead and call the question. All those in favor, resolution 20-06, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, hearing none, the motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Bucky, anything else?
No, that's it for my report. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. With that, we will move on. Mr. Mayor, for your report.
Hey, thank you, David. 4 really quick items. First of all, I know you all heard the radio show today, but I'll send another thank you to John McCann, Sandy Brady, and Chief Kelly for being my on-air guests. They all did amazing jobs and really contributed to the show, so thank you for that. Second item, I know we did a moment of silence for Jean Cadwalder at the beginning of the meeting. If anyone is interested in attending the procession, there are some of us meeting at the firehouse to watch the procession go by the firehouse on Main Street at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, so please feel free to join us for that. The third item, just another recognition of Chief Kelly and the department's work during this pandemic. There's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure on the officers and the chief, and I just wanted to, again, acknowledge their efforts and thank them for that. And then lastly, please don't forget St. Ignatius has a community emergency fund that they have been fantastic with. If yourself or anyone you know is struggling with some payments through this time, I know we're all proud. I know it's hard to ask for help, but please don't hesitate. I have watched St. Ignatius in less than 24 hours cut checks to 2 people that I introduced to the fund that have allowed those people to sleep at night. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me in total confidence, and we can connect you or anyone you may know to that fund and see if there's an opportunity for some financial help. That's it.
All right, thank you. All right, next up is our council member reports. As with our previous meetings, I know things have been light, but I still do just want to give the opportunity for each member to report on any items. So we'll start with Mr. Barry.
No report. I just echo the appreciation of the police department.
Great, thank you. Mr. Ross.
No report, but we will be having a Zoom meeting for Public Works in May.
All right, thank you. Ms. Siegel-Morris.
Also no report, but there is a public safety meeting scheduled for the first Tuesday in May.
All right, thank you. I have no updates at this time regarding Sewer Authority. Councilperson Thompson.
Keep it rolling, no report.
We're going quick. Mr. McCann.
No report as well. I want to thank Chris for having me, Mayor Harding, having me on the show, and also we'll be meeting for the community economic development the first Tuesday in May as well. So.
All right, thank you. Mr. Feiner.
Well, I missed the radio show, but I did hear that things went very well. So, and I heard that from a third party. So we will, for community outreach, we will do our meeting in May. So we'll post that, and I'm going to work out with Paula a way that, we can make this simple in terms of the website and communication for all these different meetings happening. We'll hopefully be able to use the same Zoom link as long as none of them overlap so that the process is smooth. But we'll figure all that out, and the information will be on the website.
All right, great. Thank you. So that concludes most of our agenda, or basically all of our agenda business for tonight. Do we have any other miscellaneous discussion items for future business the council member would like to raise? All right, here none at this time. So unless there's any other business, we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
A motion.
Second.
All right, motion's made by Mr. Barry, seconded by Ms. Thompson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Stay
Council.
well.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Okay.